Reddit user recently asked me a question about some very basic things about the instrument, and it really opened up a Pandora's box, so to speak. They said, I was wondering if you could make a video on shifting and the hand positions. I know you use 1, 2, 4, meaning the fingerings, for those, but everything else I have no clue about or what fingers to use. So as I said, you've opened up an outrageous Pandora's box, outrageous paper, partially because there are many ways to approach positions and fingering on this instrument. And what I want to do today is just do a basic overview and introduce a couple of general sort of standard systems so that you get a general sense of where we're coming from. So let's break down your questions and look at things in more detail now. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass. My name is Matt Rabicki. I've been playing bass professionally for 35 years with folks like Wynton Marsalis, Gerald Clayton, Ulysses Owens, Wycliffe Gordon, and many more. I was in the first graduating class at the Juilliard Jazz program and also teach there now, as well as teaching at the University of North Carolina School for the Arts. I'm glad that you're here. So before we go further, I wanted to say thanks to one of my colleagues whose name is Bill Morris. He's an excellent classical and jazz bass player, and I kind of hate him for being good at both, but he's always a great resource when I'm asking questions that sort of relate to the legit world that I don't have experience with, and he helped me out in some of the things that I'm trying to communicate to you. So thanks so much for your help, Bill. As we talk about your question, Mr. or Miss Reddit user, let's break down sort of what you were talking about and first talk about positions. And I want to do a separate video about fingerings, perhaps several videos about fingerings at another time. But right now, let's just do a quick overview of positions because there's actually a lot there. First, let's talk about the names of the position, like position names, what they're called. Because it gets all sort of gray and mixed up and so on and so forth. But I'm trying to separate it in a smart way for all of us. When we talk about names, there's two sort of main ones that differ pretty dramatically, and there's kind of two schools that people come up under. Although when folks, especially classical players, are playing, to my understanding, we sort of mix and match a lot of the choices from different methods. The names of the positions, fifth position, half, 2.5, second and a half position, this kind of stuff, the names aren't really used, especially in jazz. We don't really reference that when we talk to each other. It's pretty much just in a sort of academic environment. But these position names are useful in the methods for communicating a progression of learning. We sort of need to break down into smaller chunks for a variety of learning reasons. So the two main sort of schools are the Simandl school and the Rabbath school. I was brought up in the Simandl method, and that's what I use. This method really, it uses a lot of shifting as far as you're physically moving your hand a lot, more than Rabbath. There is a benefit there, though, to me, that there is more stability in the Simandl because your thumb generally is always sort of behind your second or in between your second and first fingers. It's sort of always there. And so you've got a very stable base. And so for me, I find that I've got a lot more sense of groundedness with that. But also, I'm not as familiar with Rabbath. In fact, I've never really studied it seriously at all. The transfer, and from my understanding, the majority of jazz players probably are coming from Simandl. I believe that's probably right. One notable exception would be Cole Davis, who uses a very Rabbath method specifically in his thumb position stuff. It's a very Rabbath idea, at least kind of coming from that area. So in Simandl, there's a lot of shifting. And let me put up on the screen here a breakdown of what all the position names would be in the new Simandl method. And you can see it's a lot. It looks like, to me, a mess. I don't know why they changed it from the old Simandl, which had 10 positions. Now they have these half positions. I'm sure there's a reason. But that said, I never really adopted this position naming system anyway because it didn't seem to have any value to me even as a student. but I wasn't taught from a classical teacher. So forgive me again if I'm speaking sort of out of turn from the legit world. But that said, as you can see, it's broken up into these 3-note sections, which means that we're moving our hand a lot. Now, if you look at the Rabbath method of naming or splitting up the fingerboard, naming the positions, you see it's a lot simpler, isn't it? And part of the major drama between the difference between the two is that you're covering many more notes per position in the Rabbath method. So the idea is that you would be theoretically, hopefully, more fluid with this because you have to move your hand, move your overall physical, the whole hand less. So besides these naming differences between Simandl and Rabbath, there are other systems that have their own distinct little bit of changes to this or things that are a little bit more dramatic. There's the old and new Simandl, there's the BA or belay, the Suzuki, the Nani or Nane method. They all have sort of different position things. So for you, if you are just starting out, I would say to subscribe to whatever your private teacher is giving you. Try your best to learn that system because any of the systems as a baseline will help you as you progress, and you will get exposure to the other systems too, generally, probably in some way or another. For example, when I did study a little bit of sort of this different than Simandl approach to fingering, I found it really helpful, practically speaking, to think about using my thumb instead of in Simandl, we're taught to use thumb position starts at the octave of the G, and we put our thumb down there, and that's where thumb position starts, and that's the only time we use our thumb. But there are other systems where the thumb is introduced lower down and allows you to facilitate some lines that are harder to play without it. So it's made playing harder things easier by using my thumb below what is Simandl thumb position. That's one practical anecdote as to a way that you can incorporate two different methods. According to my colleague Bill Morris, too, when he is educating a student, when he's thinking about a piece himself, he's going to combine, again, different methods based on what the music calls for and the context of who the player is and how fast the part is and how difficult it is to play across strings and so on and so forth. So you're sort of making a choice based on the context as to the particular position system you're using. Again, with position system and position names is attached a fingering system too. And that fingering system has to sort of do with concepts, a conceptual approach that I touched on already. With Simandl, as I said, you've basically only got 3 notes per position, except for the open string. So if I'm going to play in what is half position, I know I said I never used the names, but I remember this from Simandl, this half position. So my first finger is on the A flat. I've got the open G and then A flat with my first finger, A natural, my second finger, B flat with my fourth finger. And then if I want to play higher than this, I have to move my entire hand. Let's say I want to play A sharp, B, I have to move my entire hand, or may move my entire, let's pick another one. Let's say I want to play C, D, E. I'm going to move my whole hand here to C, D, and then maybe E with fourth, depends on what the context is. But essentially I'm sliding my whole thumb as my fingers, this position never sort of moves. And to get to a little bit of your question, Outrageous Paper, when we are below thumb position, the octave of the open strings, we are going to only use the index finger, known as 1, the middle finger, known as 2, and the pinky, known as 4. And that pinky is going to be supported by the other fingers sort of behind it. You can play it by itself, but many people that's difficult to do. And it's always helpful to have a little bit of help from the other fingers. So that is always happening, 1, 2, and 4, no matter what notes the note choices are. There are some systems that might have you using the ring finger lower, but generally, as again my colleague Bill told me, we never really advocate for that unless it's absolutely necessary for some extraordinarily difficult technical passage. That said, that's, coming from, again, a very sort of formal, legit perspective. Not that Bill is necessarily formal, but I just mean it's coming from that, a very defined thing. There's always ways to break rules, and there's always reasons to break rules. Nonetheless, all the technique stuff that we're talking about with fingers too, as a reminder, have to do with making sure that we don't hurt ourselves and that we have the most dexterity and ability to perform the music we want to play. Like how we learn how to stand with the instrument so that we're not holding it up with our left hand and it should lean against our body. Same thing with the fingering choices. A lot of it has to do with stamina, speed, dexterity, and so on and so forth. So Simandl, if I want to play, for example, a G major scale starting from the open G string, I would play open G, right? And then A with my first finger, B with my fourth, then C. I'm going to shift my entire hand to the C with my first finger, D with my fourth, E with my first, so I'm shifting my whole hand again to E. Whoops. F sharp with my fourth, and then G harmonic with my thumb. 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1. All right. And if you've seen in this camera behind me, there's a lot of this. There's a lot of moving the entire hand like this in one sort of set unit. For Rabbath, on the contrary, dramatically different concept. The idea is let's minimize the shifts as much as is reasonably possible by creating hand shapes that allow us to reach more than 3 notes per position. So we talked about half position for Simandl being A flat, A natural, and B flat on the G string. So for Rabbath, in that same sort of place, instead of having 3 notes per position where your thumb is, in Simandl, A flat, A, B flat, Simandl in this, Rabbath in this first position is going to actually cover 5 notes plus the open string. It's going to cover A flat, A, B flat, B, and C. Crazy, right? Way big difference. So I'm going open G, and then I'm reaching, if you see my thumb is, the camera behind me, my thumb is locked here, and I'm reaching up for the A flat. Then here's the A, here's the B flat, and B natural, and C with your fourth. I moved my thumb a little bit there. I am not used to this at all. I want to put more time into it because it's super interesting. Nonetheless, so I'm covering way more notes per hand shape place. If I were to play the G major scale, remember with Simandl, we went shift, shift, shift. But with Rabbath, we're going one, open, one, thumb is staying the same. I'm sorry. My thumb has not moved. 2, 4 on the C. Now I'm jumping down to the D. 1 with the D. E is 2. F sharp is going to be 4. And then we're going to open up our hand to play the harmonic with our ring finger. 2, 1, 4, 2, 1. So there we've eliminated many of the shifts. Oh, there are 2 shifts in that instance instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 shifts. Instead of 4 shifts, we've got 2. So that is a huge difference in the approach. So conceptually, you can see right away, I'm sure, how that would be a huge difference. I think part of the reason that folks don't necessarily use this so much in jazz, this is a guess, partially because the Simandl method is older, but I think my guess is that we tend to stay with Simandl because of that stable, grounded feeling that we have in our left hand when we're shifting, when the thumb is always behind, so that we can get more of a sort of oomph to the feeling, the sound when we are laying down quarter notes. To get sort of the thickest sound for a really long time, it's quite hard to have your hand, reaching as far as it can sort of physically go and really put a lot of sort of strength into that quarter note. So to me, it makes more sense that it's more sort of, a sledgehammer versus a ball peen hammer or something, The Rabbath is more sort of refined and you can get around quicker, but I find it harder to imagine that I would have the same sense of rock solid quality to the sound and time if I'm opening up and sort of not making my hand as stable. I think I said the same thing like 20 different ways. Sorry. Nonetheless, we haven't talked yet about the ring finger, except to say that I'm opening my hand for the ring finger, and that sometimes we would use it in lower positions. Where it really comes into play is in thumb position. And this also has different positions, not just called thumb position in Rabbath, although everyone sort of says thumb position. They don't necessarily say like sixth position when they mean up here. So because the notes get so much closer together in thumb position, there's a lot of options, a lot of fingering options. I mean, Simandl method itself has 2 different fingering options for thumb position for F major, neither of which I really love. We'll go into that in another video. But my point is that's even one method has 2 sort of, decision. Already you got to make a decision. And then you incorporate the other possibilities of methods, and you've got a ton of things to choose from. So unfortunately, it's not a quick and easy black and white answer. Again, go to what your teacher wants to do. But the ring finger is used in thumb position. In thumb position, we're using thumb, first, second, and the third. So we've got 4 fingers involved, and that also adds to the complexity of fingering choices. We're not using the pinky in thumb position. So below thumb position, pinky yes. Above, pinky no. Below thumb position, ring no. Above thumb position, ring yes. So you'll see T for thumb, or sometimes the circle with the line in it for thumb position, and then you'll start to see the number 3 indicating fingerings there. As I say, generally the approach, though, the concept still applies where if you're coming from a Simandl method, you're doing a lot of shifting and there's less notes per shift, and that applies in thumb position too, versus the Rabbath method where you've got your really sort of stretching in a very honestly logical way, especially up here in thumb position. Makes total sense to me. Another reason that you might want to adopt Simandl position, the Simandl method first, if you're just getting into it, is that because a lot of us come from a lineage of teachers that learned Simandl, I'm saying in the jazz world, then we play with that method, with that fingering, with those position thoughts. And so the note choices that we make, while they may not always be the most fluid or necessarily the prettiest or whatever you want to say, they are making those decisions based on a Simandl concept. And so if we want to mimic great players, it makes sense to mimic the method they are using too, to me. I'm talking about like sound, timbre, feel, that kind of thing. Actual note choices, that doesn't really matter, but we're talking about sort of mimicking like every little bit of what Paul Chambers is doing, as an example. Again, I'm not dissuading you from trying out Rabbath. It's great, it's amazing. Please don't take the wrong thing. So if you want to mimic that feeling, Simandl. If you're interested in more fluidity, faster playing, tons of thumb position stuff, really getting around the fingerboard more easily, check out Rabbath. It's a completely different concept, as we saw. So what about something related to dots, to dot or not to dot, as I think Lauren Pierce said. Do we put markers on here? I have said this in other videos. I am still all for normalizing the idea of marking your fingerboard in in a good, reasonable way, however best works for you, and in a way that isn't going to cause more problems. But this sort of machismo, like gatekeeping thing of not having marks on your fingerboard is silly to me. It really is. Now, mind you, I don't have marks on this particular fingerboard. I may put them on. I'm going to definitely put them on the Upton, the new Upton that I have, because the sort of ratio is different than what I have here. I'm more familiar with this fingerboard. That said, if you feel like that's going to help you find your place on the bass, please go ahead and do it. I will take whatever anger comes towards me in saying that, but I really feel strongly about it. And there's a couple of ways that we can do it. Of course, you can have them professionally installed. You can have dots actually put into the fingerboard. It's not terribly expensive, generally speaking. You can also try to use stickers, but stickers move, they can move. And it's also kind of difficult to find the right spot for where they are. It's a little bit safer to try something like nail polish, actually. Cody Rex from Bass Violin Shop, amazing player and great bass shop that he has, advocates for sort of using a whole paper hole punch reinforcement sticker, put it on there, and then put just a dab of perhaps even black nail polish so that pretty much only you can see it. Let it dry, take the sticker off, and you've got a nearly invisible dot there. There are also some that are specially made that are black and sort of also supposed to be not so conspicuous if you don't want to bring so much attention to it. But as long as it doesn't interfere with the sound or your ability to play, I'm all for it. There are master players that have dots on their bass and they play the heck out of me in circles and triangles, and so I have nothing against it. I think it's great and I think it's really helpful. One thing to note though is when you have some kind of markings on your fingerboard, also you can use pencil too, but that does smudge off. But that also means it's easy to take off. It doesn't damage your fingerboard. You could put a pencil line. When you have a marker, if your bridge shifts up or down, like if it points up towards you over time, the strings pull it up, or if it points down, that's actually going to change where the correct note is, where a note in tune is. And so if you're finding that you're out of tune for some reason and you're not sure what's going on and you have markers on there, think about the bridge. It may be out of place because it's being set, it's being put on, it should be put on based on an exact, or as exact as possible, sense of like where the harmonics are scientifically as the partials of the string vibration. So there's things to take into account, but generally I'm saying don't worry about going down that path, at least when it comes from me. You can send them to me, send them my email, and I will argue with them. It's totally fine. You mentioned fingers, and I've talked about fingers a little bit so far. And as I said, I want to do a couple different videos about it. But in general, as I mentioned, we are just sticking with 1, 2, and 4 down here below thumb position. And we are moving our entire hand in the Simandl method to accommodate where we want to go. We make the decisions for what fingers to use based on a couple different factors. The first being the context musically. What note or notes are you coming from and where are you going? That is a huge, if not the primary decision maker in what fingers you're actually using. The other thing is actually sound. Of course, like certain notes on certain strings ring differently, and if you have a preference for how that sounds, then you'll make that kind of choice. There's also a sense of too, if you're trying to, say for example, get a longer quarter note happening or something like that, then you may be thinking about which finger to use to get a longer quarter note going. That's a little bit reaching out there, but for example, the middle finger generally has a little bit of a different sound. It's a little bit hard to hear, but if you put it on the G string, you've got this kind of sound with the middle finger, and then applying the same amount of pressure with the first. It's very close, but there tends to be a little bit more sort of growl with the middle finger. A little bit unclear about why that is, but I know that that's in some of the fingering strategies in the legit world as well. So there are some of those choices that we're going to be making when we're talking about specific fingerings. All right, I hope that this was helpful for you today. Thanks for joining me. Look for a PDF below where I've got some images and some text for you to check out in reference to what we talked about today. Thanks for joining me, and always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.